It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Bernadette Roche, who leads GREENGRACE along with Dick Williams. GREENGRACE is the wonderful environmental ministry of the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland. They do amazing work. They could need advocates to help always. We always need people. Bernadette worships at the Episcopal Church of the Transfiguration in Braddock Heights and is a biology professor at Loyola University in Maryland and Baltimore. Thank you, Dr. Roche.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm hoping that you will be seeing a pretty picture. The door prize goes to whoever can figure out where that picture was taken. So I am so grateful to have this time today to work in collective action with all of you on this Zoom event today. I'd like to introduce my co-lead, Dick Williams. He's a Chesapeake Bay landscape professional and faithful environmental activist who worships at Memorial Episcopal Church. We've been working very closely with the leaders of the Maryland Environmental Human Rights Amendment Campaign, Rabbi Nina Beth Carden and Claire Miller, who are here with us today. And we have worked together to develop a breakout session on allyship and advocacy this afternoon. So let me tell you a little bit about GREENGRACE. We promote the Episcopal Church's creation care vision. So we look at this in the same way as they do. The loving, we'll share stories of concern for the earth and connect others who care. We have some stories on our GREENGRACE website, for example, and we meet regularly and share what we're doing around the diocese. Liberating, we stand with the most vulnerable to environmental degradation and climate change. This is the environmental justice piece. And life-giving, we change our habits and our choices. And I should say also our actions to live more simply, humbly, and gently on the earth. Today, I wanted to tell you about GREENGRACE's focus on environmental justice. In our breakout session, we're going to be talking about several bills and an amendment. But we, for example, with the Maryland Episcopal Public Policy Network, have submitted oral and written testimony on 2 bills that were of particular interest to Bishop Sutton. One is, you just heard about, the Maryland Coal Community Transition Act, HB 66, SB 148. The other, unfortunately, was withdrawn by the sponsor, Pat Young, and that was the use of glyphosate, which is otherwise known as Roundup. And it was a prohibition. It was amended to be a prohibition for government agents using it on, government agencies using it on, say, for example, sidewalks or in parks. But I'm not really sure exactly why it was withdrawn, but it was. But I'm assuming it's coming back. There's also nationwide legislation on glyphosate, as there should be. 2 other bills that we're going to highlight today in our breakout session are the Climate Solutions Now Act, which was mentioned earlier, I think twice by other people, so you can tell that's an important piece of legislation. And we'll be looking at that through the lens of environmental justice in our breakout session. And then the Stop PFAS, it's a persistent toxin, Stop the PFAS Pollution Act. And I'm not going to talk too much about those now because we'll talk about them more in the breakout session. So how do we sort through all these bills? So, when you look at all the environmental bills that are being proposed this session, you can't even really fit them on one screen on an Excel spreadsheet, I'll tell you that much. So how do you figure out which ones to support and where to pour your energy? So one way to do it is to get involved with collective action with trusted sources. So we work, for example, in GREENGRACE very, very closely with IPL and IPC, Interfaith Power and Light and Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. We're also working with the Maryland Environmental Public Policy Network and coordinating with them, coordinated efforts, and we've sort of joined their team and they've joined our team. We look to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. What bills are they supporting? And when there's not one on their page, we have to wonder, why is it not there? And dig a little deeper. They have a whole team of lawyers. For example, one of our GREENGRACE members, Paul Smale, is a CBF lawyer. Also Sierra Club, we look to, not always is it a faith-based organization, we look to Sierra Club for their legislative action alerts. And we can read their fact sheets and try to do our own research. If you really want to do your own research, you can go to legiscan.com/MD and you can read the actual bill, the language from start to finish there. You can see what's literally written in the bill and make your own conclusions. But it's, you know, it's hard, and it really does take a village, and it takes a lot of people looking at these things from many different perspectives. So, you know, we're here as GREENGRACE to support you, and also the Maryland Public Policy Network, you know, meets regularly as well to support you on that sort of mission. So just wanted to mention that if you want to learn more about GREENGRACE, I made this little diagram here to help show you what is GREENGRACE. Well, we are a steering committee for the Episcopal ministry on the environment, the diocesan ministry. We also communicate regularly with Green Shepherds, which are representatives to congregations. And if you feel the Holy Spirit in you calling you to be a Green Shepherd, you please email me. I'll put my email in the chat and we'll get you on that list. And then finally, individuals in the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland, we communicate to them through our Green Shepherds and through e-news and that sort of thing, through our website, through our Facebook page. Please like our Facebook page. We have lots of informative events posted there. And I mean, you can look at it today and there's like 3 or 4 things that are happening this week. We meet regularly on the 3rd Tuesday at 7 p.m. by Zoom. We always welcome new members to meet with us on the steering committee. And, you know, we'll send you emails if you want to sign up for that. So I welcome you to join us. As I mentioned earlier, we've been working closely with Claire Miller and Nina Beth Carden, the leaders of the Maryland Environmental Human Rights Amendment Campaign. That is a mouthful. The MDEHR. Rabbi Nina Beth Carden is the director of the MDEHR and a grateful activist working on behalf of Earth and humanity. Claire Miller, who worships at St. Luke's Eastport, is a marketing professional who, through her deep faith, is addressing basic human needs for clean air, clean water, and healthy land. As co-founder and communications director of the MDEHR, she's going to tell you more about that and our joint breakout session now. So I'm going to pass the baton on to Claire and I'll stop sharing.
Okay, thank you so much, Bernadette. I really want to thank the partnership with GREENGRACE and with the Maryland Episcopal Public Policy Network. It's been a wonderful collaboration, and both Nina and I greatly appreciate that so much. So yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about an environmental rights amendment this morning. And I'm going to tell you why I think we need one, what it says, and what we think it will do in the state of Maryland. But I want to start with a personal story. So I spent my childhood summers swimming in the Elk River. That was kind of my playground growing up. It's where I learned and found my love of nature. But as that child, I didn't realize how polluted the water was that I was swimming in. And it's only now, many years later, that I'm getting more educated about the connection between our environment and pollutants in the environment and how that impacts our health, that I am personally wondering about whether some of the diseases that I've developed as an adult are contributed by, you know, what I was exposed to in my environment. And I raise that story because I think that is the frame for the conversation we're going to have today about the amendment. It's about understanding the connection between our environment, the health of that environment, and our public health. So in 1973, Maryland actually did a wonderful thing. It passed the Maryland Environmental Policy Act, and it actually it recognizes the right that we all have to live in a healthful environment. And the language you're seeing on this slide is a direct lift from the policy. So each person has the fundamental and inalienable right to a healthful environment. And while this is wonderful and inspiring language, unfortunately, there are limitations to this act. It's limited in its scope. So it only applies when state agencies are looking for funding of projects from the Maryland General Assembly, which doesn't happen too often. And most of the state agencies have not adopted rules and procedures, which they were requested to do to actually protect our environment. So what that has created is, unfortunately, 50 plus years of decisions that have allowed pollution to exist in certain communities. So, most of our communities of Black and Brown people and our communities who are poor and low income are really suffering most of the burden of pollution in our state. This is just one example in South Baltimore. Nina actually worked with the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health to dig into the connection between pollution, environmental pollution, and human health. And one of the facts that the students uncovered was that in South Baltimore, which is represented by that yellow circle, there's 200 pollution emitting sources in a 2.5 mile radius. So it's not a big surprise that then when you look at the public health data and see that asthma hospitalizations are significantly higher for those residents of Baltimore City compared to the national average. And so this is just one example. There are other examples in other counties where air and water pollution are impacting the health of residents. There are citizens fighting all these factory farms on the Eastern Shore. We have residents in Prince George's and Charles County who are fighting against power plants being put in a concentrated area that is negatively affecting their health. And so these are just a few examples, but when you start to think about how many different sources of pollution there are and how it affects so many different communities, you start to wonder, how can we start to address this problem more holistically? And when I think about my faith as a Christian, as an Episcopalian, and our call to be stewards of our environment and also care for the most vulnerable, it makes me want to find a solution that can actually help to address that. And so that's what leads me to talk to you today about the constitutional amendment for environmental rights. You see the bill numbers on the slide, but the amendment really has two main components. First is actually protecting our fundamental right to a healthful environment. And so we're picking up the language from the Policy Act of 1973, but we are adding some qualification that a healthful environment means clean air, water, land, and a stable climate. And the second important provision is providing a role for the state. And so this would establish the state, our government, state and local government, as the trustee of Maryland's natural resources. And so those resources are shared by all of us who live in Maryland. And it would require, as a trustee, for the state to actually protect these resources for future and for current and future generations. So this is not a new idea. Other states have actually passed environmental rights amendments. There are 6 states right now that have provisions for environmental rights. And the next state is going to be New York. In just this current session, New York State passed an environmental rights amendment, and it will be going on the ballot in November in New York State, which is very exciting and very inspiring for us. And it would be a similar process here in Maryland. We would need to pass this environmental rights amendment in the General Assembly, and then it would be put on the ballot for us here in Maryland in the next general election that we would have. So that's the process. But what could an amendment do? And so I want to leave you or share with you 3 ways that I think the amendment could make a difference in Maryland. The first is really changing expectations and changing behavior. And this is really with respect to our state and local government, because as trustees of these natural resources, they need to think proactively when they make a decision for a permit. Well, how is this going to affect the impact? How is this going to affect our natural resources, our air and water? How is this going to affect the health of the community that lives there? It's going to make that conversation actually be a part of the decision-making process, because they're going to have that responsibility to protect the environment for all of us. Secondly, it's going to be, it's going to empower both the public and the state. So we expect that with an amendment, a community that is fighting a trash incinerator or a power plant could use the amendment as part of their legal argument for infringement on their right to a healthful environment. But it also could be used at the state level. Think about all the years we've been fighting with Pennsylvania about some of the pollution that just flows down into our bay. So we believe that this amendment could also be part of legal cases that our state could bring against other states or private entities. And third, we see the amendment as supporting the legislation that is in front of the General Assembly today, the environmental legislation. And we see that it could inspire passing environmental justice legislation that is sorely needed to help many of the communities that are fighting those fights today. So how can you help? Well, as Bernadette mentioned, we are having a breakout session this afternoon on allyship and advocacy. And as part of that activity, we are going to be writing a letter to our state legislator about the amendment. So hopefully you can join us in our breakout and do that. If not, I understand there's a lot of good breakouts today. We'll also put a link in the chat about where you can write a letter to your legislator. Secondly, we definitely need help in terms of getting the word out and educating about this environmental rights amendment. So if you are interested, if this piques your curiosity, please reach out to Nina or myself. We would love to come talk to your congregation or a community or interest group that you are a part of. And I really, again, thank you so much for being a part of today and having this opportunity to speak to you all. Thank you.